everyone. Welcome into a Building Blocks Thursday here with Unemployed with Mike Schaefer. Building Block Thursdays are brought to you by Bubbles and Blocks Child Development Center. With 3 convenient locations across the capital city, Bubbles and Blocks is well suited to handle your child care needs. The center boasts strong curriculum for the children, helpful staff that have your child's best interest at heart, and as my son could attest, when we lived in Lincoln, the most nutritious and tasty food your kid is likely to come across at a daycare. And that matters. Trust me. That absolutely matters to the parents. It matters to the kids. Much like recruits value stability, so do parents. And so does Bubbles and Blocks, where its management team has been in place since 2019, with some of them having even started with the daycare when it opened in 2013. Spots are open at all 3 centers. Get your child enrolled today. Give them a call at 402-328-0404 or shoot an email to info@bubblesandblocks.com. All right, everyone. I have been excited about this show since before this format even existed. And a big part of that is this Thursday, every Thursday, I'm going to be joined by, as you see him here, Tim Verghese of Inside Nebraska. And I have known Tim. Tim, I don't even remember exactly when you showed up at Nebraska as a freshman, but we connected when the summer before you arrived, because I had saw on Twitter you had made yourself a commitment announcement for Nebraska journalism. I was like, okay, I'm interested in this kid, and I knew that you were very interested in recruiting, very interested in football, and so I reached out to just kind of introduce myself and basically say, hey, if there's any way that I can help while you're up here, anything I can do. And we got to talking, and one thing led to another, and you started helping out at Husker 24/7 a little bit. And then you've kind of been anywhere and everywhere since then, bouncing around, and made your way back full circle to Nebraska at Inside Nebraska. And as someone who's been doing, or was previously, in the same role that you're in, and did it for a long time, I have a ton of respect for what you do, Tim. And I say this, deep from the bottom of my heart here. I have competed against a lot of people. Tim is as good as there is. By the time I was let go by Paramount, Tim was better than me. I was chasing Tim on a lot of stories. It was frustrating because the man has information. And so as I put this whole thing together, and I thought to myself, like, who do I want to talk to these days? What do I want to talk about? I knew if I was talking about recruiting, portal stuff, team stuff, whatever it was, I had to have Tim involved. And I reached out and you said yes. So I really appreciate it, Tim. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And I think these Thursday shows are going to be some of our most popular, most fun every week. So thank you for being a part of this.
Of course, I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to work together again in this kind of capacity. And
Yeah, the first
I
time.
wouldn't.
I
Yeah,
was thinking about this. I have never done a show with you. Me, maybe the biggest media whore in all of the Nebraska media. I've done like anything and everything. And I was thinking about it the other day, and it's like I have never been in any format where we're being recorded talking with you. I've talked with you on the phone, talked with you in person, talked to you through text. We've never been recorded. We've never
we
had
collabed on
a
articles
yeah,
together, but never collabed on like
yeah.
shows.
So this is a first. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, no doubt. And listen, I wouldn't be here without you. I mean, spotting me in the
That is
first
not
place and
true
giving me
at
the
all.
opportunity. And I learned a lot. I mean, listen, I truly did learn a lot from my time at Husker 247 and just my time on campus. So I'm happy to be back. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, let's just jump right into this because I know everybody wants portal talk and they want it now. And so let's just we got a lot of stuff we want to get to. And so let's just get this one started. We're now like basically 6-7 days into the portal officially being open, players able to go in and visit and everything else, sign, all of that good stuff. How are you feeling about what Nebraska has accomplished so far here on January 8th? You had a tweet the other day where you said you felt like there could be as many as 3 waves in this kind of portal cycle. And you said that you thought we were just now getting into the second wave. How do you feel like Nebraska did in the first wave then of the portal?
Yeah, so first wave, I think you saw them identify and really move fast at a few positions, offensive line, getting in Brendan Black as quick as they did, that was clearly something that, a guy that prioritized and wanted. Tree getting him in town that first weekend as well, and then at linebacker, clearly a point of emphasis, clearly a need. I think, of course, getting Chambliss in town, something that most people kind of had an eye on or figured out once Rob Orich joined the program, that this was something that could move pretty quickly for Nebraska. Nebraska getting that done is still pretty impressive for the fact that he had like big time, like powerful, like college football playoff contender type programs in the mix for him, but wanted to stick with Orich, wanted to follow him. I thought Dexter Foster was a really fun, interesting land, and a guy that I think gives you some much needed size and athleticism. And I think he's a guy that's going to be pushing for that starting job next to Chambliss this fall. So, linebacker, offensive line, clear 2 points of needs. Going out, getting McDougall, I think, I think they had options in terms of safety. We've talked with a few of them. They had an offer out to Mekhi Shaheed from Youngstown State, but canceled that because of what they had coming in McDougall after getting him on campus. That's a guy that's super well rounded, immediate plug and play safety. So you've seen them identify certain positions and move fast at it. But obviously, they like running back remains a key position of need, which they have some options out there. They're assessing, and they have time there. That's a position where you don't need to rush necessarily. Defensive line is the one where they moved fast and had things lined. Even guys that didn't necessarily make it to campus, they've been aggressive. I've heard now from multiple agents that Nebraska was very much in the defensive line market and very competitive from a financial standpoint. But it's just the fact that, I mean, for a combination of reasons, the performance on the field this year, not currently having a D-line coach in place, and different things, they have not been able to get those guys on campus, and even the guys they have gotten on campus have not been able to secure commitments as of just yet. So obviously UCLA defensive end Anthony Jones was on campus recently, and the Huskers are trending there. That's going to be one to watch. But even he, I think, is more of a like stand-up edge defensive end type that works into the rotation. That's not a guy that's coming in, and I at least I don't think at this point, based on what we've seen from him, is a surefire starter. That's a guy that works in the rotation. So you need more there. You could also obviously at the defensive tackle need 2 to 3 additions there. So that's what I'm waiting to see at this point. But I think in terms of addressing needs and moving quickly to identify and land some of these guys, I'm impressed at certain positions, and you have to give the credit to the assistant coaches and the personnel staff overseeing those positions. But yeah, like defensive line is one of those things where clock's ticking at this point. Where, I mean, someone on our board asked, is it when is the time to kind of hit the panic button on defensive line? I think if we're sitting here next Monday or Tuesday and Nebraska doesn't have a defensive line commit, I think it's time to start getting a little worried about that position.
So one of the things that I think is difficult with a portal, and I have to guard this with myself too, particularly at something like running back, which we'll talk about here a little bit later, but it opens, and like the human subconscious nature is basically to want everything immediately. You want it right away. You want everything to work out exactly as you planned. And here we are, it's January 8th. I don't know what Nebraska is necessarily doing at running back. There's obviously rumors swirling there. Nebraska doesn't have a defensive line coach. They haven't had visitors to the effect that sort of what you had talked about. Now they are efforting, as you said. But how much of it with the portal is you have to also be patient and let things kind of play? Like there's going to be the day one, day two, the big moves, the Brendan Sorsby's, Andrew Marsh, the guys of that nature. But then there's also going to be the big ones, that come a little bit later. Like you said, if there's so many different waves in the portal, how does a program kind of make sure that they don't, shoot their wad too early, if you would?
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. I think it's just you kind of wait for the big time programs to do that first. You kind of wait for Texas Tech to go and spend their money and address their needs, and then wait and see what pops up. And then and not necessarily wait. I mean, everyone's proactive about this. Like, they miss out on a guy, they'll go, they'll reach out to others in the portal or tamper or try and find, guys that fit the need. And so that's I think the best way, in my opinion, it really depends on position. Like, I think it's important to be dialed in. I think it's important to have just in the sense of like be organized in the sense of like, okay, here's our like tier one type of targets where if this guy becomes available, we spend this amount of money on it. We're going all in on this guy. And then you have your like tier two where like if this guy's in it and there's mutual interest, we're going to go and we're going to pursue this. And then tier three, and you kind of build it based on what you think's going to be in the portal, not necessarily what's in there. And then as it starts to settle out, you adjust your board accordingly. So there's guys, I would say on Nebraska's board that aren't on the portal yet. There's some names that are for sure been rumored. I think right now, keep an eye on obviously Minnesota's Fame Ojibwe. That was a name that emerged pretty early for the Huskers. Sounds like they're circling back around there. And working to get him on campus. That's a name, and I don't think they're necessarily done. I could see 2 running back additions, but like running back is one of those positions where it truly is not best available. It's about best fit. It's about what you're looking for, what scheme you're running, and again, like I think a lot of personalities, how they work off of. And Nebraska now having Anthony Calandria in there, how does that guy work off of Calandria? How does that guy going to work into like what I expect to be a true RPO kind of option system where Nebraska is going to incorporate the QB run game and incorporate runs off of the QB run game, and you're going to see a shift in philosophy from the offensive line. So there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of evaluation, but running back's one of those positions where, at least in my opinion, patience is necessary. Like you need to have patience there. I would even say with D line, like obviously it's unfortunate, and I wouldn't say unfortunate. It's not fun to be in recruiting battles against Texas Tech, and that's not just a Nebraska thing. Like every program in the country at this point is
I
like,
mean, the
oh
best
my,
teams in the
like
country want defensive linemen.
right.
Like
Everyone wants it,
that's
and like
right.
and right now the market for defensive linemen is pretty absurd. You're seeing just 300-pounders enter with limited experience and limited playing time, and getting absurd offers. So there's just a lot to factor through and work through, and for Nebraska, your hope is with Pat Stewart overseeing everything, he has an idea of the market value, what he's willing to spend at certain positions, and where if needed, he's willing to spend above. And defensive line at this point, where Nebraska's at, I think is one of those positions where they're going to have to spend more than maybe they want to, or be the highest bidder in order to land true difference makers at the position.
Yeah, with that defensive line, I mean, some of it not having a coach, like, do you think there's a timeline here? Have you heard any names? Is there anything you're at liberty that you can kind of say at this point in time with what's happening on at the defensive line coach position?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine we have an announcement by around this time next week, but I think they need to move a little faster than that, just with where we're at in the portal. That said, I think having Matt Rule, Rob Orich, and I think Roy Manning's picked up a lot of slack there. Having those guys on staff helps. And again, it's not for a lack of trying. Nebraska absolutely has gotten D linemen on campus, are working to get more on campus, have been the highest bidders for others out there that have not necessarily made it to campus, or at least, they've been competitive from an NIL standpoint. But it's just one of those things where, like, yeah, until they get a name in there, it's going to be really hard to like truly make a move. And now, like, of course, there's some chatter out there about Aaron Terry, Iowa Western Community College defensive line coach. That's a guy that perhaps makes some sense, but at the end of the day, you think, you listen back to what Rule said about the position, what he's looking for from the role. You need to be able to recruit. And the jump from JUCO up to Power Four recruiting is sizable, and it's one of those things where you have to be able to sit in the living rooms and relate to these kids and their parents. You have to be able to get in there and battle up against. You're in the Big Ten. At Nebraska. You have resources. You have to be able to go in there and battle the Ohio States and Texas Techs, or against Texas and so forth for some of these top defensive linemen. Is Terry that guy? I think Terry's a great developer. I think I think he would be a really good position coach. But what Nebraska's looking for is something that can do it on the field and off the field. And that guy's going to be tough to find. And there's a reason why, it felt like, I mean, honestly, I mean, where we're at this point, very much feels like they were very keyed in on Elijah Robinson. And then some changes happened, unforeseen changes happened at A&M that saw Robinson head back down there. And Nebraska was forced to reset a little bit. And unlike the transfer quarterback thing, the plan B wasn't as quick. There wasn't a plan B lined up in the same way that there was when they missed out on Robinson.
Yeah. Hey, so who would you consider, like, right now? And this is tough, but if you were to give me, say, 3 key targets for Nebraska right now in the portal, guys that they're either having on campus, have already had on campus, or you expect they will get on campus, just 3 names, could be any position. Your
Ooh.
call.
Yeah, I think at this point, left guard's one. Paul Buchanan's a name that popped up the other day. I believe it was Paul Buchanan. That popped up the other day. That's going to be a name to watch. I would also keep an eye on Paul Mubenga from LSU, another guard transfer. One that could make some sense for Nebraska. I think that like when, in terms of moving fast and where we're at this point, those are two I would keep an eye on in the coming days. Defensive line, I would say they're at least tracking. Um, a Maryland transfer, and sorry, trying to track his name down. Dylan
You're good.
Fontes from Maryland, who recently entered the portal. He texted me and told me he's got like 25 plus programs in the mix for him at this point. But Nebraska's among the 5 or 6 that he's really considering, hoping to make a visit out to. So that would be another one to keep an eye on. And then I've seen a little more. I think running back would be the third. I would say Fame or kind of mention a guy that's not necessarily in the portal. There's plenty of buzz around Jamar Brown, and I don't
Yeah.
think I think there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I think we got to at least touch on that. What you know about Marty Brown, and I know you did a deep dive when Nebraska was pursuing him this spring. You saw how he did at Miami, the role that he kind of held there, sort of as their kind of backup, almost second backup at times, but also a power component, a finisher for him in short yardage. How strong of a fit do you think Marty Brown would be if he were to enter the portal and end up back at Nebraska?
I mean, it's a great fit. I mean, I think he's a guy that, I mean, last year would have been ideal as like a complimentary back to Emmett,
Yeah.
and kind of working into that rotation. Now you have an opportunity to kind of take over and be the top guy, potentially in that rotation, and working off some, I wouldn't say change of pace. I think him and Mackay are somewhat similar, but like, I think Mosey's a bit of a change of pace from him. And I think you have an opportunity to have 3 backs there that are capable of taking, 5 to 10 touches per game, if not more, you know what I mean? And between a 3-man rotation, I think Tamar's capable of 10 to 15 plus, even 20 if needed. But you look at Mackay, you look at Mosey behind him. I think that's a pretty sound rotation right there. You throw in Fame in there as well. Replace Fame with Chamar. I think Fame's more of a true short yardage guy. Chamar has some of that to him, of course. You've seen that at Miami this year. But I think Chamar is fully capable of being that 3 down back, and maybe not the bell cow that Emmett was this year. I don't think Nebraska wants to get back to that where they're leaning on a guy so heavily like they did on Emmett this year. But I think Chamar, if needed, is fully capable of like carrying that load and carrying the offense on his back if needed.
Let's kind of transition over to Anthony Calandria versus Kenny Minchey for a little bit. How big of a difference is it for you as a guy who loves getting into the film, loves looking at these quarterbacks and not just the stat line, but actually watching them, watching the mechanics, all of that. With Minchey, you have a limited opportunity to do that. With Calandria, you have the exact opposite. You have 3 years worth of film. You can see where he's developed. You can see what was different about him, not just statistically, but what was just different about him at UNLV than at Virginia. What do you make of these being the 2 guys? First, Nebraska not being able to get Minchey and then ending up with Calandria, but also just, do you see a shift at all in what they might want to do offensively now that they have Calandria and not Minchey?
Oh, yeah. So I think the first part of that, I think they identified Minchie early and was clearly their guy, when the portal opened because of a couple of reasons. I think there's a high floor there, just in the sense that this is who he's been since high school, a high floor quarterback, capable of delivering out of the pocket, but can create on the run if needed. The lack of experience is there, but I don't think it scared Nebraska away. I don't think it scared any team away from him, just because of what you look at the combination of tools, the traits, the wares, like just his mindset and how he's wired. I think there was a lot there, and there was a reason why Nebraska wanted him and why Kentucky moved as fast as they did to kind of flip him. From there, I mean, obviously Nebraska had options and had a board, and I think Calandry was the guy that immediately emerged because you look at what Minchie had and what you're looking for there. You're looking for a playmaker, and what Minchie didn't have, which is experience, and it just kind of made a ton of sense. Where look at their other options, Bo Pribula, injured, inconsistent thrower. I think also kind of is not necessarily the gamer that I think Calandria is. Same thing with Childs, where like Childs was a guy that kind of emerged for them, but you look at that, there's a lot of risk there. I don't think there's a risk with Calandria, just in the sense that this is a guy that is turnover prone. This is a guy that is going to be like, he's a gunslinger in the sense that like you live and die by Anthony Calandria, and we're going to hear that a whole lot this offseason. You're going to see that in the season, unless and again, unless Dana can dial him in, which like I kind of think Calandria and Dana has opportunity to kind of feed off of each other in a good and bad way. Like they're going to bring out the best and at times the worst in each other. Not the worst, but just in the sense that there's going to be times I think next year where it's going to be, they feel confident, they want to scheme something up, it goes well, they try it again, it doesn't go so well, just because that's who they are. Dana Holgerson and Anthony Calandria are risk takers, and so what you're looking for, I think for me, the biggest difference between the two is the mechanics and just the arm talent. Minchie's super dialed and comfortable in the pocket and wants to deliver from the pocket with sound mechanics, like remarkable touch and accuracy, I think, across the first and second level for sure, but can hit those third level or those deep shot throws. With when you turn and look at Calandria, it's a lot more creating on the run, like even throwing on the run, a lot more throwing on the run, moving the pocket. A lot of, hey, when things go off, like when the play breaks down and he's out of structure, that's when he's almost at his best at times. Capable of delivering at all three levels, but he's not like, not the sharpshooter I think that Minchie was or Minchie is. And so that's the biggest difference. And I think when you look philosophically what Nebraska wants to do, I think Minchie's a guy that you bring in and you try and evolve this offense into something like what I would say. I'm trying to think of a good comp here, but kind of what Notre Dame's had these last few years. With Riley Leonard, even before that, with more so Sam Hartman, I think with Riley Leonard.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at what they want to do with Calandria. This is where I think they can really lean into some of the stuff that Georgia Tech did with Haynes King these last 2 years. Like this is that kind of wiry, athlete. He's not as big as Haynes. Haynes is a big athlete,
Right.
but a wiry athlete with arm talent. That's just a gamer. Again, a guy that's going to rally the team behind him. This is a guy the team's going to fall behind and rally behind just because of his play style, his work ethic, and I think his energy. So he's a good dude.
Do you think that Nebraska needed a little bit more of a risk-taking quarterback coming off of 2 years of Dylan maybe trying to be a little bit too fine, too perfect, and at times maybe even too cautious for his own good?
Yeah, you see Calandria. You see Calandria and he's ripping it. Like, he's the guy that he's totally comfortable ripping it. He's totally comfortable taking those deep shots, throwing it into tight windows. Again, basically just daring a DB to try and pick it off. And you didn't see enough from that from Dylan Raiola. Like I thought especially downfield, like again with Dylan on some of those touch throws against the sideline on those fade routes, it's always trying to have the perfect placement and try and do it where it's the perfect like out of risk throw where it's in the receiver's hands or it's out of bounds. That's great and all, but you look at Calandria and he's giving his receiver a chance to make a play on the ball, and that's important. That really matters. And again at UNLV, like something that I would say what I was really impressed with when watching back the UNLV tape, that's a team that's full of mercenaries. Like the receiver room, the linebacker room, the D line. It's just a bunch of guys that have transferred a bunch
It could be
and
a
ended up
mercenary
in the league.
program. Like, that's what it
Yeah,
is.
very much so. And so but you saw Calandria hit on some of these timing throws. You saw him hit on some of these back shoulder fades and comeback routes and stuff that takes time to develop. And with Nebraska, it was always a thing, or with Dylan Raiola specifically, not solely his fault necessarily, but with Nebraska was one of those things where over the last 2 years, it was something Dylan was coming out of high school was seen as like a weapon of his or just like a strength of his. But I feel like the chemistry never really developed with anyone besides Jamal Banks. Like Jamal Banks was really the guy that he had that chemistry to throw it up and go get it and knew exactly how to do it. Dane, the thing with Dane, I felt this midseason when they were trying to hit those like fades in the end zone or some of those timing throws. I'm sure they hit them more often than not in practice. For whatever reason, it just wasn't coming together in the game. And again, is it Dane not being able to get off his whatever that is? That's the difference. I think Calandria is a faster burn and willing to give his guys chances, and not necessarily in a risk taker in the sense that he's not risk averse in the way that Dylan is.
So let's I see you waving at people where you're at. And so
I'm at the press box, so people are just coming and going.
Tim's down in San Antonio, so let's take it down to San Antonio. And unfortunately, he's not on the Riverwalk right now, but maybe he'll find his way there at some point. You got to also hit the friendly spot when you're down there. Have you been to the friendly spot when you've gone to San Antonio ever?
I have not. I need
Look
to
look that up. It is
Okay.
I think you'll enjoy it. Brunson and I made that our place so multiple times we went down to San Antonio. But Tim's down there because Nebraska has a couple commitments that are playing in the Navy All-American Bowl. And they've got several targets that are playing in this thing as well. What have you kind of learned this week when you've been down there? I'm sure you've had a great opportunity to watch a guy like Claude Puma, who, massive get for Nebraska in that 2026 class. They really need this to develop and work out. Like
Yeah.
this is one of those where, regardless of everything else, like if I could just pick one recruit that turns into being everything that a coaching staff hopes and dreams for, Nebraska desperately needs that in a tackle prospect and a guy like this. What have you seen? What have you heard?
Yeah, so I mean, the length, the upper body strength, the athleticism, it's all there. But like I think you guys are. I mean, I've been talking to media people here that have not seen him in person yet, and they're drooling over him. Just like, man, look at the traits, look at the tools, look at him. Like just move around. Um, Super smart kid too. Like just talking to him around this week, super personable, super smart, learning multiple languages. I think he's a three, and he's learning his fourth language right now. So like, really smart kid. And on top of that, like again, basketball background, but he's not, I think, the slow burn that I think Grant Bix was coming out of high school and kind of still is. Where like Brix is at this point, maybe even a guard projection at this point, where he has very limited pass protection experience. Claude at least has that, but he's very football young. I think that's important to remember. I saw, people were like, people were asking, Michael Carroll, you saw David Sanders, and you've seen some of these young tackles and offensive linemen get playtime early. Is that capable? Is that possible for Puma at Nebraska? I don't think so because he's much younger from a football standpoint than those guys. Those guys play like Michael Carroll, 4 years at IMG. 3 years at IMG, a full lifetime of playing football. Claude's been playing football for 2 years now. And year one, it was very much a work in progress in pass pro. You saw some improvement this year. You're seeing some more improvement this week, but he's being tested. I mean, he told me himself, like, this is what prepares him for college, is going up against his competition. He jokingly said, he's like, he's here. And he's like, this is the first time he's really had to like try, against, and like really like, because, I mean, in
Yeah.
Chicago at his size, Northside is 6'5", 340, closing in on 340 pounds with like a near 7-inch wingspan. Like that guy doesn't really need to try against typical high school players, but he's out here against some of the best. And yeah, he's having to try. He's gotten beat sometimes. I think the biggest thing with him is going to be the lateral. He's got good lateral movement, but figuring out just the pass set and figuring out how to consistently drop, figuring out his footwork. And because he's agile. He's really, really agile for his size. And that's what makes him really impressive. Like you've had these big bodies, you've had the Caden Proctors, you've had these massive, I mean, obviously at Evan Neal, at all these guys that are ginormous prospects, but cannot move. Their feet are stuck in cement. That's not Claude. Claude played basketball. Claude played soccer. And at soccer specifically is what I credit to his footwork at this point. Really talented player, in my opinion, and has an opportunity to, because of his brain, has an opportunity to be a quick learner. And by the end of spring, wouldn't be surprised if he's like well further along than any of us expect. That said, year one expectation should be this guy needs to probably sit on the bench behind Elijah Pritchett and develop. And he's excited about that. I asked him about the additions of Brendan Black, Tree Babalade, what he thought about Elijah Pritchett. And he's like, for him, he's excited to learn from others. He's a big fan of Jeep Wade in this conversation so far. And I think that's a guy that is capable more so than the last guy here, more so than I think, or I think I have more trust, I think, in Wade to get the most out of Puma over the next 2-3 years at Nebraska.
Yeah. Another guy down there, I think he's competing this week as well. Danny Odom, one of the
Mhm.
big recruiting evaluation wins for this staff. I mean, I've hammered him in the past, particularly under Evan Cooper, where it felt like they kept trying to unearth gems instead of going and getting guys that could play. Danny Odom is a gem, and he's a guy that can play. Vaulted up the recruiting rankings all throughout the 2026 recruiting cycle. What have you seen from him? And is this a guy that could he play very early in his career? I mean, it's rarefied air for Nebraska with Danny Odom. They generally aren't getting those guys, and certainly not getting them that coming that far away from home or without a prior
Right,
Nebraska connection.
right. He's been good this week, and he had his best day. I think today was more of a kind of walkthrough with a lighter practice. We had some physicality yesterday, and we've been joking around here with media and other folks. Like, I kind of wonder if some coaches made some calls because all these guys are very expensive players. Being like, why are we knocking Chris Henry Jr. out of bounds? Why are we doing some of that? Like so. It's been a little less contact today, a lot less contact today. Yesterday we were thumping, they were hitting yesterday, so a little less physicality today. But Danny's been really smooth in coverage. I just talked to our rankings team here at On Three, and they're planning on making him a top performer for the day, just because how he's looked moving around. I mean, yesterday in 1-on-1, 7-on-7, and then you saw a full scrimmage period. Man, like I think he's really catching these wide receivers off guard with his physicality and length off the line of scrimmage. You got really long arms. He's a 6'2" corner, so plus size for the position with really long arms, and like the upper body strength really catches guys off guard. It's guys will they'll he squeezes guys pretty naturally to the sideline just off that length. But on top of that, like you watch him sink his hips in coverage and change directions, move around. He is sticky. And again, we don't have a whole lot of verified speed or a whole lot of verified in terms of athleticism on him. I don't think it matters. Like it doesn't matter who he's gone up against here. He's gone up against the quicker receivers like Nick Lanier, 2027 speedster out of Miami Northwestern. These big bodies like Chris Henry Jr., 6'5", 5-star headed to Ohio State. It hasn't mattered. He's played up against those guys. He's stuck in coverage. And he's a guy that, like you said, man, I think he's going to push for like not just playing time as a freshman. I think he's going to push to start in the secondary as a freshman and like at outside corner. Like he's fully capable of that. I think there's a lot of you saw this year at Oklahoma. Cortland Guillory, a personal favorite of mine, fellow Klein Oak alum, who started as a true freshman this year for the Sooners, very much held his own and was fully capable as a plus size corner, very much held his own. And there were times where he was picked on naturally as a true freshman, but it didn't matter. Oklahoma obviously made it to the playoff, had a good year, and I think Odom's capable of having that kind of year one impact.
So I know there's some 2027 guys. I think Ahmad Hudson being the biggest in terms of the targets for Nebraska that are down there in San Antonio. I mean, this cycle gets going here too. I mean, coaches can actually I got to check. I mean, coaches can go on the road at some point this month, right? Or has
They
that
they
been?
should. They can
Yeah,
go like now.
yeah.
I have been
So
stunned to see Oregon is currently assessing the transfer portal, has coaches on the road, and is preparing for a playoff game. I have no idea how that staff is managing to do all of those things at once, but credit to them.
how much of that, like before we dive into the 2027 stuff with Nebraska, how much of that is because you can have guys that aren't designated full-time coaches go out on the road, so you can sort of split up and really have your evaluation road team, but then also have the guys at home and coach too.
Yeah, like Oregon's sending their like director of high school relations on the road right now. It makes a ton of sense. That guy does not need to be right now. The portal is the big priority. That guy does not need to be in the building. Get that guy on the road. Let him go recruit. That helps a ton. And I'm excited to see Nebraska right now just because of where the season, like the way the
Mhm.
season went, coming out of the season straight into kind of building for the portal. Haven't had an opportunity to assess the staff, but I think you're going to see some movement this offseason in terms of building out, like filling out, I think, a bigger staff and having some flexibility where, okay, guys are on campus, but yeah, we can send maybe like a Jamar Mosey on the road while all of this is happening. Maybe we can send, one of our personnel assistants on the road. Maybe we can send a recruiting coordinator, whatever it looks like, they can send someone on the road. But I think that's what you're going to start to see. That said, I mean, this is an unprecedented kind of situation where the calendar changed. You're in this weird kind of 2-week period where the portal is this. Everyone's moving around fast. The calendar is going to keep changing, and teams are going to keep adapting. But the teams that have the bigger staffs, have big staffs, and have staffs where there's work that's delegated across the board, and everyone knows their kind of role, are the staffs that are winning right now in the portal.
All right, let's dive back into 2027. Ahmad Hudson, one of those guys down there in San Antonio. You've seen him in person now a few different times. I mean, an impressive prospect, a guy who's a two-sport athlete, certainly at the top of the wish board for Nebraska and Nebraska's quarterback commit, Trey Taylor. What do we know about Nebraska and Ahmad Hudson? He's had some of those cryptic tweets, I think, in the month of December. He got people pretty fired up. What do we know? Where is this thing at? And do you think a commitment could be coming anytime soon?
So I'll say this: I talked to him again yesterday, and he continues to stick by the July 4th is the planned decision date. And as of right now, I have little reason to believe that he's lying. But that said, Nebraska's making a very strong push, and it wouldn't surprise me if he pulls this timeline up for anybody, it's going to be for Nebraska. He's expected back on campus later this month, January 31st, Feb 1st, going to take in his first game at PBA. I think the big thing here that a lot of people are discounting is the basketball side of it.
I was
Football
going to
side of
ask
it's
you about that. Yeah.
the football
Can't
side of
hurt
this
to
is
be
obviously
15-0 right now.
yeah, and that's the thing. The football side of this is huge. Obviously, it's the position that that everyone sees them as the number one tight end. All of this stuff, but like the kid's really good at basketball. One, two, he really wants to play basketball. He wants to do both sports. And he wants to excel at both sports. He wants to be developed in both sports. And I talked to him for a while. I have the story up at Inside Nebraska later this week. But talked about him for a while about Nebraska's what he's seen from them this year. He watched that Michigan State game, and he's a big who right now has to play center. Naturally as a 6'7" tight end prospect in high school. Like it just kind of makes some sense in Louisiana, just be a center prospect. But he wants to prove he's more than that, and he's loved what he's seen from Nebraska, getting their bigs in space, allowing them to move around, spread the ball out. And again, compared to some of these other programs, they're the best basketball program right now in the mix for him, which is crazy to say. But they are very much the best basketball team in the mix for him. And at this point, have pitched him more than any other school on like what he would be doing on the basketball court. And you pair that with the fact that he's hearing regularly from Matt Rule. He's hearing regularly from Keith Williams. He's hearing from Da'Keel Shorts. And at this point, he's hearing daily from Trey Taylor and Tay Ellis. Like those two guys are on him every single day about Nebraska. What's going to be the thing here is going to be the big question, and what lurks over this is obviously LSU. Believe it or not, for whatever reason, I kind of thought I only got clarification about this yesterday when I was talking with him and Rivals' Sam Spiegelman. 1 second, Nebraska just picked up Anthony Jones, UCLA
Look at
defensive
this
end. So
live breaking
we got a live
news.
commitment.
Yeah, so Anthony Jones commits to Nebraska. Tim is obviously going to have to work a little bit here as well, but this is the sort of stuff that happens on a Building Blocks Thursday. We get Tim Verghese in here, and he's telling us about everything going on with Nebraska recruiting, and they pick up a commitment. Tim, I'm sure you saw, actually, I think you retweeted it. Roy Manning, I think, kind of hinted that something might be coming here with a guy like Anthony Jones, and so he's an addition for Nebraska on the defensive side. You mentioned he was at UCLA. I'm going to try to pull up what I can real quickly because Tim trying to sneak in some work, doing double duty, helping us out here. He's a Las Vegas guy, and he's played in 37 games in his career. He's had 14 starts over 4 seasons at UCLA, Michigan State, Indiana, and Oregon. So he has been multi-year transfer, which I think is something that we're just going to have to get used to here in portal lifetime, where a guy is going to have 2, 3, 4 different homes at some point in his career.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
What do you know about Jones?
Yeah, so let me pull this back up 1 second. All right, back on screen. Yeah, he's a guy that I think when you saw, I think the UCLA tape, a guy that you see some juice there, you see some so just ability to fit the run and rush the passer and do some of that stuff. But like I mentioned when we were talking about him earlier, this is not a guy I'm expecting to be like a surefire starter. I think he's a guy that is capable of, and perhaps Roy Manning with what he did at San Diego State with Trey White, Ryan Anderson can unlock something out of him, a breakout type season. Um, at the end of the day, you look at a guy that's been out on his 5th school in 5 years, but it's all across the Big Ten for the most part. There's obviously something there. And I think his body has evolved over the course of his career. He's like a true kind of defensive end now that in Rob Orish's scheme can be kind of that strong side defensive end with his hand in the dirt, or he can be a guy that kind of has to is more of a stand-up edge. Can do both of those things at a pretty high level, and at least work and give Nebraska some quality snaps off the edge. Now, is he a guy that like a Deshaun McCullough, or I would even say like an MJ Sherman, where you're getting 30, 35 plus snaps out of him? I don't know necessarily. I think this is a guy that's going to be working into the rotation. I think ideally you want him to be not necessarily the floor, but you want him to be the second or maybe the third pass rusher off the bench, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so basically someone that, you're bringing in depth for your defensive line, but if I'm understanding you correctly, certainly not someone that this isn't a tier 1 guy that Nebraska is looking at as far as their edge rushers or defensive line help this year.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, at least I don't think so. And maybe Roy Manning disagrees with me. Maybe Rob Orris disagrees with me, and they see something in the UCLA tape that they believe they can unlock. Believe a guy rushing the passer maybe off of Williams and Winari and Cade Petrock and whoever they add at defensive tackle with the linebackers behind him. In a better hypothetically a better front seven. What he could do, but yeah, I think at this point he's more of a rotational guy and not even I would even say like maybe a step below I think what Deshaun McCullough was come when he transferred into Nebraska.
Yeah. Let's jump back over to the 2027 stuff. I mean, what do you perceive to be the biggest needs for Nebraska in the 2027 class? Is it just as simple as, and they brought in a lot of them already, just fill up as much as you can on both the offensive line, defensive line, and then let everything else kind of fall where it does?
Yeah, I think you look at 27. Yeah, offensive line, defensive line. I think you really need to make some moves there. Honestly, like offensive line is going to be a position I expect them to fully address as they try and work this room out. But um, I'm intrigued to see what they address. I like how many tackles they go after. Do they look for a true center here? I mean, Jeep Wade's talked about that. He doesn't want to like convert. He wants to recruit centers. And so I'm excited to see kind of if he circles in on anyone there. What how many guards? But then yeah, defensive line is going to be like they need to start making some moves there. They need to start like building out the depth there and really getting some impact difference makers there. Having a defensive line coach again will impact all of this. Who that guy is, what relationships he brings with him, is going to impact all of this. Besides that, I could see them addressing and surrounding Torrey Pittman with another like talented safety. Corey Hadley is going to be a name to continue to watch out of Sandy Creek. Um, Linebacker is a position I don't think is as big of a need because of the portal additions.
Yep.
You probably lose Chambliss after this year, but he's got another year of I believe you lose Chambliss after this year. But Foster has a couple more years of eligibility. You added a guy in Will Hawthorne who, if Nebraska had their say in 2025, they probably would have taken him, Dawson Mayer, and Christian Jones. Like they were pretty behind those guys. Plus they got Pierce Newberry. I don't think linebacker is a super big need, but um, at this point I would say offensive line, defensive line. And then, man, to be honest, I think after this year, you're likely losing Nizea if they land, if they end up landing Quasi Gilmer, whatever happens there, could see him move on for the program as well. Ja'Cory Barney, what happens there as well. You got some young pieces in that wide receiver room, need them to develop, but I'm fully expecting Trey, especially as they kind of figure out this offensive identity. And if they have a strong start to next year, I expect them to be aggressive in surrounding Trey with some talented pass catchers.
Well, and Trey's going to be aggressive in terms of the peer recruiting like he has been, but that's just sort of a thing that I'm curious. And I know that you have conversations with him off and on. I know he's been pretty vocal lately on Twitter. Do you think he's still able to sell Nebraska in the same way, even with the sort of kind of dud of a finish that they had with the games against Penn State, Iowa, and UCLA, or excuse me, big difference, Utah, not UCLA. The way things sort of finished there, the win that kind of came out of the sales that is Nebraska's offseason momentum. Do you still think that he can get out and peer recruit and sell Nebraska, even without some of the buzz that had sort of been propelling everything leading up to that USC game?
I think it's harder now. But that said, I don't think it's impossible. And I mean, you talk to recruits. So another 27 out here today is or out there this week's Aaron Washington, top 10 corner, out of California, and he's a guy that continues to speak highly about Nebraska. And it's Nebraska USC kind of coming down to the stretch. USC has the edge. We'll see what happens, but I say that just to say, like, that guy visited in November twice. He saw the USC game and then he came back for the Iowa game. Two very different vibes. Obviously, Nebraska came out at the end of that losing, but two very different vibes. But I think for him, it's less about the result of that second game and more about what the conversations he had with not just like with other commits on campus, but with Addison Williams, with Matt Rule, and getting to see the facilities and getting to see the program. Nebraska is still in a position where they can absolutely keep selling the future. But I mean, in terms of capturing momentum, they really needed, even if it was just for look at the schedule, look at the progress, like they needed that eighth or ninth win.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I mean, the further I get away from the season and I look back on it, like I look at the pre Dylan Raiola injury of like, okay, yeah, the offense didn't necessarily have an identity, but they were moving the ball consistently and they was really leaning on Emmett. And they had something there. Defense was a mess. It just is what it is. I think a lot of lessons were learned, and you hope they learn those lessons here soon in terms of addressing D-line in the portal. I think a lot of lessons were learned from that, but in terms of selling the offense, I mean, I could see this first month of Dana and Anthony Calandria, and even spring ball with Dana and Anthony Calandria drawing enough buzz where it's not super hard to sell guys on what this offense can be down the line with a Trey Taylor, with a TJ Lateef in the years moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I was excited about having Tim on this show for is that Tim is a college football junkie. He's a football junkie just in general, and I could pretty much throw any team, any name at him, and he would give me some sort of an opinion or an evaluation. And so I do kind of want to lean on your junkiness here if we could, and I want to zoom out of just Nebraska with the portal. First, I just kind of want your thoughts on this Damon Williams thing. Like what is an ideal outcome to you? Because there's so much at stake in terms of a precedent based on what happens here. And then there's also the awkwardness of if for some reason they enforce the Washington contract, that's going to be really weird for him, for Washington, for all of it, because that bridge got burned to the ground on the way out of town.
Yeah. I mean, I've been banging. I mean, I think you got to take this all the way back to when NIL got started. Like you were there, you remember. It's kind of happened on like a Wednesday, and there was like I was like, where's the rules? Where's the oversight? Where's the any of it? It's just like, oh, here you go, guys. And then they kept changing things and they kept adding things, and you know, it's just continued down this path where it's like, okay, NCAA, show some teeth. Okay, NCAA, come on, it's time to show some teeth. Hey, are you going to enforce any like? And now we are at a point where it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do here? How do you address this? What's going to? I mean, here's the thing. I think at this point he's not coming. If he comes back to Washington, he's not going to play. Like, there's no like. And I started to put. I thought it was really curious that Noah is it Fafita? I don't know how to say it, but the Arizona quarterback. Um, I believe it's
Yeah.
Fafita, but
Yeah, that's
Noah
right.
Fafita was on campus like the day before Damon entered the portal. I was like, that's interesting. Why is he at Washington? I assumed it was just kind of one of those things where there was like like familiar with Jed Fish working in the room and gives them like a solid backup option, kind of like a Jalen Graham said. Obviously different, but kind of like Jalen Graham said. No, look, that guy might just be the starter next year. So with this whole thing. So at this point, I don't think it's even tenable for him to come back to Washington
Right.
as a starting quarterback. But I mean, the thing is, the other part of this is he can just unenroll and re-enroll wherever he wants. Like that can just happen, and you can get away from all of this, and he can go play at his new school. And yeah, there'll be some legal stuff to figure out, but it won't really matter for the 2026 season. Like that's going to be long and drawn out and figured out. At some point, like someone needs to do something. Someone needs to step in. You're getting to a point here where it's excessive. It's over. It's over the top. And this situation in particular is one of those where because you got to zoom out and look at all of this, man. Like Lane Kiffin is on campus at a basketball game with Sam Levitt when all of
Yeah.
this and it clearly
Right.
clearly these things are in motion, all happening at once, and it's like it just doesn't like you're losing a lot of you're losing fans. Fans are getting turned off by this. I mean, you're burning out. I mean, not just like the top end of the sport, the coaches and the GMs and so on and so forth. Like, there's a lot of recruiting assistants and personnel assistants and assistant coaches and all these guys that don't make enough money to deal with all of this. Like don't just truly do not have even the mental capacity to deal with all of this. Like I've had it's just a mess, and I think the Demond situation in particular really is an opportunity to be a turning point, an opportunity for someone, NCAA, someone to step in here and figure out how we can move forward. Like I don't have the answers. I wish I did. I wish I knew how we can like kind of correct this and move this thing forward. But at this point, we've just kind of opened this can of worms, and there's no real person that has a great idea on how we can get this thing back back in line.
Yeah, and I wish I had the right answers too, but I don't know what they are. We're so far down the line. I don't know where you cut it off at. I also just know that if teams can't respect the contracts of other teams, then there's if you set the precedent that it doesn't matter that someone signed with an NIL contract, there's nothing that prevents anybody from moving at any point in time. So what are we doing? But we'll see. This is where the alleged leaders of the sport have to to actually take a stand. So we'll see. The other issue is the court systems just ravage everything. So that's the part of it that I've struggled with the most. But let's move off of that to things that are a little bit more interesting. We'll finish up here with a couple more things here. Tim, has there been a team that you've just sort of sat back and you've watched the portal play out and you're like, man, they are just killing it with what they're doing? I know Indiana has had a pretty nice start to the portal, in addition to, being the most talked about team in the country right now, as they're undefeated and the number 1 seed and playing in a college football semifinal. Obviously, Texas Tech with getting Sorsby and some of these defensive linemen. Is there anybody that you think has just killed it so far in the portal?
Yeah, I mean, what Indiana is doing is remarkable. Like, what a dialed operation that is. So just in terms of preparing for the playoffs, getting their visitors in, lining them up, getting them to commit, not really missing on any top targets, and again, just like doing their best to improve, turn that roster around. I've been pleasantly surprised with what Wisconsin has done as well, though. I've really like Colton Joseph's obviously the big name, but they've added a bunch of like very, very, very nice complementary pieces. I think Arkansas has done some good work. Oklahoma hasn't needed to add a whole lot, but the vibe from last offseason to this offseason around Oklahoma is night and day, just in terms of
Yeah.
what they're doing, what they're building. Like
I thought Venables was going to be fired this year if it
yeah,
didn't go well, and that
but
is
now
not
it's yeah, now and they're doing a really good job of adding complementary pieces. They didn't need to add a whole lot to the roster, but I'm a big fan. You look at Wisconsin's class. I'm a big fan of the linebacker they just added Christian Legal just left, but sorry, the safety they added Marvin Burks Jr. From Missouri. That was a personal favorite of mine coming out of high school. A guy that makes a ton of sense and is kind of a plug and play guy potentially for Luke Fickell. Lucas Simmons, offensive tackle from Florida State, another big frame guy. Brian Jackson, a productive guy who's had some production in the Big Ten, big back that reminds me, again, he's not necessarily like a Jonathan Taylor necessarily, but he's kind of those bigger backs that, Wisconsin has had back in the day. And so I like what they've done. I think Colton Joseph's a really fun player that's going to be a headache for a lot of these Big Ten defensive coordinators. And kind of, I mean, it's kind of do or die time for Luke Fickell. And
yeah.
I've been pleasantly surprised in how he's attacked the portal and again, gotten some of these guys to buy in and commit to him.
All right. Give me your predictions. Oregon, Indiana, and Miami, Ole Miss. I'm sure these were the 4 teams that you had in your personal bracket when you filled it out a couple weeks ago. We're a Texas Tech win against Oregon away from what would have been the perfect Final Four for me. I would have loved that. But what do you got? How do you see this playing out?
I think Indiana wins because, and the only reason I say that at this point is Indiana beats Oregon is I just saw the press conferences yesterday with those guys. Man, Tosh Lapoy is doing 2 jobs at once. Will Stein's doing 2 jobs at once. They look exhausted, and I just don't know how. Like again, I expect them to be dialed. It's Oregon. It's Dan Lanning. It's a very again dialed operation, but I just think there's a level of focus coming from Indiana's side that I don't think Oregon can match. On the other side, I think it's going to be Miami. I'm leading on the trench play, but talking to some people around here this week, like there's a belief in Miami and in Ole Miss's tempo, the way they play offense, Chambliss's ability to kind of create off script where they can really create some damage. And I mean, I said it after they won against Georgia last week. We are kind of looking at a team with destiny kind of situation here. This is a team, and my biggest issue with Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss to this point had been he always had talent. Last year, I think was his most talented roster in my opinion. He's always had talent. But not for whatever reason, I know exactly why. Because when you're a mercenary type program and you don't really necessarily rally the guys and give them something to fight for and give them an edge, you have a lot of talent kind of playing for themselves. And yeah, and that can win you plenty of games. But when it gets to playoff time, when it gets to crunch time, those guys aren't dialed in for each other. Those guys aren't playing with an edge. They're playing with an edge now. They have something to prove. They're rallying behind Pete Golding. They have a common enemy. And you're seeing a level of like, I think, fight and want to from guys on the roster that you didn't see earlier in the season. So for all of those reasons, I think that game's going to be more of a toss-up than maybe people expected coming in. Still think Miami, I think they're just they're big in the trenches, they're dominant in the trenches, and I think they can enforce their style of play here. And so I think it's going to be Miami, Indiana in the end, but I'm very curious to see how both these games play out. I think we're in for 2 competitive matchups more so than what we saw last round.
Yeah, that's a clean sweep so far of guests on the show. Josh had the same predictions. I've had the same predictions. We'll see what Jack Mitchell says on a Feedback Friday. Tim, thank you for taking the time. Nebraska getting a commitment during it. People could see you work. People could see you waving to the other folks in the press box down here. You are absolutely killing it, and I could not be more thrilled to have gotten you locked in here to being on this show on Thursdays. Building Blocks Thursdays, brought to you by Bubbles and Blocks Child Development Center with me, Mike Schaefer, and Tim Verghese. This is going to be so much fun every Thursday, getting to have these kind of conversations. Obviously, really Nebraska heavy, but diving around all of the college football world as well. As I mentioned, Feedback Friday show tomorrow. Get your questions in somewhere. You can tweet them at me. I'll throw the email up here so people can they can see the email address. It's unemployedi80@gmail.com. Get questions in. Like I said, tweet them at me. You can, if you're on the Discord, get them in on one of the channels there. We will be spending a lot of time just soliciting feedback, talking through questions people have, figuring out what's going on with Nebraska football, talking about Nebraska basketball, everything else. So we'll have a good show on Friday. Tim, best of luck to you down there in San Antonio. We'll catch up again next Thursday. This was fantastic. Thanks for your time. Everybody else, we'll see you not next week. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm not used to working every day. We will see you tomorrow. We will be unemployed tomorrow, and we will be here at noon.
All right, we'll see you.